My sister slapped my baby during Christmas dinner, then told me I was overreacting. Everyone just sat there, until my military commander husband stood up, looked her straight in the eye, and said, "Get out." She never came back. What would you do if your own sister slapped your baby across the face at Christmas dinner, and then your entire family acted like you were the one making a scene? My world shattered in that moment. But what came next was an even more shocking betrayal, forcing me to confront 28 years of feeling utterly invisible in my own family. It was Christmas, or what was supposed to be, December 23rd, at my parents' house. And of course, it was Vanessa's show as always. She rolled up 2 hours late in her white Tesla, dragging in an entire film crew, ring lights, cameras, the works, all to document her authentic family Christmas for her lifestyle blog. I stood there, holding 6-month-old Lucas, gently bouncing him as he fussed, watching my mom, Patricia, literally rearrange the dining room around Vanessa's equipment. The house smelled like cinnamon and roasted turkey, but underneath it all, that familiar, suffocating tension of a Sterling family gathering was thick in the air. My dad, Robert, was in his usual corner, scrolling through his phone, perfecting his art of selective blindness, especially when it came to his daughter's drama. Vanessa had been hyping this dinner for weeks online, calling it her family gratitude special. What she conveniently left out was that my husband, David, had just returned from a 6-month deployment overseas, or that we'd driven 3 hours just so Lucas could meet his grandparents for the first time. None of that mattered for Vanessa's narrative. David walked in from the guest room, where he'd just changed Lucas's diaper. He looked sharp in his dress uniform, carrying that quiet authority he always had. He caught my eye across the room, gave me that small, reassuring smile that told me everything would be okay, even when I really wasn't sure it would be. The dining room? It looked like a magazine spread. Vanessa had moved our grandmother's antique candlesticks, family photos, even swapped out the napkins for ones that photographed better. She was directing her cameraman like it was a commercial because, well, it pretty much was. My mom, Patricia, buzzed around, adjusting everything to Vanessa's impossible standards. The turkey, bless its heart, was under heat lamps just to look good. David helped me settle Lucas into his high chair, the same worn, solid wood high chair that had belonged to David's grandmother. It looked so out of place amidst Vanessa's curated aesthetic. Lucas, completely oblivious, gurgled happily, reaching for his toys. The meal started with Vanessa's infamous gratitude speech, delivered straight to her camera, while the rest of us sat in awkward silence. 10 minutes. She talked about family traditions, togetherness, blessings. Not once did she mention David's deployment, Lucas's first Christmas, or any of the actual people sitting right there. When she finally signaled for the camera to pause, the tension eased just a fraction. My mom immediately started serving Vanessa first, of course. My dad emerged from his phone just long enough to carve the turkey, though he kept glancing at the cameras nervously. David and I exchanged glances, trying to eat, while keeping Lucas entertained and quiet. The conversation, if you can call it that, was Vanessa-centric. Brand partnerships, collaborations, follower counts. My mom hung on every word like it was a masterclass. I tried to share updates about our lives, David's promotion, adjusting to parenthood. But my words just evaporated. A polite nod here or there, then right back to Vanessa. It was like trying to add ingredients to a recipe that had already been cooked and plated. David noticed, of course. He always did. He'd ask me follow-up questions, drawing me back in, talking about his base, our friends, how proud he was of me during his deployment. His efforts were kind, but they also highlighted how little my own family cared. Lucas, bless his heart, was being incredibly well-behaved for a 6-month-old, chewing on toys, babbling, giggling at the camera lights. But eventually, he started getting tired. His happy coos turned into whimpers, that telltale precursor to a full meltdown. I suggested taking him to the guest room, but Vanessa immediately objected. She was filming the heart of the segment. Having people leave would ruin the content. She insisted babies were adaptable, a little fussing was normal, and we shouldn't interrupt her special family moment. My mom chimed in, agreeing, saying I was being overly cautious. My dad just nodded, still looking at his plate. David's jaw tightened. I knew that look. He suggested gently, maybe a short break from filming? But Vanessa was already pivoting. Lucas's fussing, she declared, was authentic. She began talking to her camera about the beautiful messiness of real family life. Lucas's whimpering escalated into actual crying. The desperate, exhausted sobs that just break a parent's heart. I reached for him, instinctively. But Vanessa held up her hand to stop me. Still filming. Still trying to capture this authentic moment of holiday chaos. She thought his distress was adding authenticity to her content, proving her family was real and unfiltered. David's face had gone completely still. That look he wore when assessing a threat. He was calculating, weighing options, trying to find a diplomatic solution. I tried to reach for Lucas again. Again, Vanessa stopped me. This time, she was sharper. I was being dramatic. A little crying never hurt anyone. She even reminded me she babysat in high school. Lucas was wailing now, the sound filling the room, competing with Vanessa's continued monologue about embracing the chaos. Everyone else at the table had stopped eating, stopped pretending. They just watched. Then it happened. Vanessa, clearly enraged that Lucas's crying was drowning out her audio, leaned across the table. Her hand moved so fast I didn't register it. Crack. The sharp sound of her palm against Lucas's cheek echoed through the suddenly, horrifyingly silent room. Lucas's crying stopped, instantly, replaced by a gasping, shocked silence that stole the air from my lungs. Then came a wail unlike anything I'd ever heard from him. Pure bewilderment, pure pain. His tiny cheek was already turning red. Nobody moved. My mom, frozen with her fork halfway to her mouth. My dad, eyes wide with shock, but still in his chair. The cameraman, still filming, unsure what to do. Even Vanessa seemed stunned by her own actions. But David moved. He rose from his chair, slowly, with the controlled precision of a man who'd trained for high-pressure situations for years. No rush, no explosion, just the deliberate unfolding of a man who had made a decision. His 6 feet 3 inches frame seemed to fill the room, his dress uniform making him even more imposing. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet, but it carried the kind of authority that made people listen without question. Turn off the camera. It wasn't a request. The cameraman, looking terrified, complied immediately. The red recording light vanished, plunging the room into an even deeper silence. David walked around the table to Lucas. He lifted our son with such gentle competence, holding him against his chest, murmuring soft reassurances. Lucas's cries began to subside, reducing to hiccuping sobs as he buried his face in David's shoulder. "Vanessa," David said, his voice still calm, but with an edge that made everyone sit straighter. "You just struck my infant son." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I need you to explain why you thought that was acceptable." Vanessa's face went through shades of pale shock to defensive red. "He was my sister slapped my baby during Christmas dinner, then told me I was overreacting. Everyone just sat there, until my military commander husband stood up, looked her straight in the eye, and said, 'Get out.' She never came back. What would you do if your own sister slapped your baby across the face at Christmas dinner, and then your entire family acted like you were the one making a scene?" My world shattered in that moment. But what came next was an even more shocking betrayal, forcing me to confront 28 years of feeling utterly invisible in my own family. It was Christmas, or what was supposed to be, December 23rd, at my parents' house. And of course, it was Vanessa's show, as always. She rolled up 2 hours late in her white Tesla, dragging in an entire film crew, ring lights, cameras, the works, all to document her authentic family Christmas for her lifestyle blog. I stood there, holding 6-month-old Lucas, gently bouncing him as he fussed, watching my mom, Patricia, literally rearrange the dining room around Vanessa's equipment. The house smelled like cinnamon and roasted turkey, but underneath it all, that familiar, suffocating tension of a Sterling family gathering was thick in the air. My dad, Robert, was in his usual corner, scrolling through his phone, perfecting his art of selective blindness, especially when it came to his daughter's drama. Vanessa had been hyping this dinner for weeks online, calling it her family gratitude special. What she conveniently left out was that my husband, David, had just returned from a 6-month deployment overseas, or that we'd driven 3 hours just so Lucas could meet his grandparents for the first time. None of that mattered for Vanessa's narrative. David walked in from the guest room, where he'd just changed Lucas's diaper. He looked sharp in his dress uniform, carrying that quiet authority he always had. He caught my eye across the room, gave me that small, reassuring smile that told me everything would be okay, even when I really wasn't sure it would be. The dining room? It looked like a magazine spread. Vanessa had moved our grandmother's antique candlesticks, family photos, even swapped out the napkins for ones that photographed better. She was directing her cameraman like it was a commercial because, well, it pretty much was. My mom, Patricia, buzzed around, adjusting everything to Vanessa's impossible standards. The turkey, bless its heart, was under heat lamps just to look good. David helped me settle Lucas into his high chair, the same worn, solid wood high chair that had belonged to David's grandmother. It looked so out of place amidst Vanessa's curated aesthetic. Lucas, completely oblivious, gurgled happily, reaching for his toys. The meal started with Vanessa's infamous gratitude speech, delivered straight to her camera, while the rest of us sat in awkward silence. 10 minutes. She talked about family traditions, togetherness, blessings. Not once did she mention David's deployment, Lucas's first Christmas, or any of the actual people sitting right there. When she finally signaled for the camera to pause, the tension eased just a fraction. My mom immediately started serving Vanessa first, of course. My dad emerged from his phone just long enough to carve the turkey, though he kept glancing at the cameras nervously. David and I exchanged glances, trying to eat, while keeping Lucas entertained and quiet. The conversation, if you can call it that, was Vanessa-centric. Brand partnerships, collaborations, follower counts. My mom hung on every word like it was a masterclass. I tried to share updates about our lives, David's promotion, adjusting to parenthood, but my words just evaporated. A polite nod here or there, then right back to Vanessa. It was like trying to add ingredients to a recipe that had already been cooked and plated. David noticed, of course. He always did. He'd ask me follow-up questions, drawing me back in, talking about his base, our friends, how proud he was of me during his deployment. His efforts were kind, but they also highlighted how little my own family cared. Lucas, bless his heart, was being incredibly well-behaved for a 6-month-old, chewing on toys, babbling, giggling at the camera lights. But eventually, he started getting tired. His happy coos turned into whimpers, that telltale precursor to a full meltdown. I suggested taking him to the guest room, but Vanessa immediately objected. She was filming the heart of the segment. Having people leave would ruin the content. She insisted babies were adaptable, a little fussing was normal, and we shouldn't interrupt her special family moment. My mom chimed in, agreeing, saying I was being overly cautious. My dad just nodded, still looking at his plate. David's jaw tightened. I knew that look. He suggested gently, maybe a short break from filming? But Vanessa was already pivoting. Lucas's fussing, she declared, was authentic. She began talking to her camera about the beautiful messiness of real family life. Lucas's whimpering escalated into actual crying. The desperate, exhausted sobs that just break a parent's heart. I reached for him, instinctively. But Vanessa held up her hand to stop me. Still filming. Still trying to capture this authentic moment of holiday chaos. She thought his distress was adding authenticity to her content, proving her family was real and unfiltered. David's face had gone completely still. That look he wore when assessing a threat. He was calculating, weighing options, trying to find a diplomatic solution. I tried to reach for Lucas again. Again, Vanessa stopped me. This time, she was sharper. I was being dramatic. A little crying never hurt anyone. She even reminded me she babysat in high school. Lucas was wailing now, the sound filling the room, competing with Vanessa's continued monologue about embracing the chaos. Everyone else at the table had stopped eating, stopped pretending. They just watched. Then it happened. Vanessa, clearly enraged that Lucas's crying was drowning out her audio, leaned across the table. Her hand moved so fast I didn't register it. Crack. The sharp sound of her palm against Lucas's cheek echoed through the suddenly, horrifyingly silent room. Lucas's crying stopped. Instantly. Replaced by a gasping, shocked silence that stole the air from my lungs. Then came a wail unlike anything I'd ever heard from him. Pure bewilderment. Pure pain. His tiny cheek was already turning red. Nobody moved. My mom, frozen with her fork halfway to her mouth. My dad, eyes wide with shock, but still in his chair. The cameraman, still filming, unsure what to do. Even Vanessa seemed stunned by her own action. But David moved. He rose from his chair. Slowly, with the controlled precision of a man who'd trained for high-pressure situations for years. No rush. No explosion. Just the deliberate unfolding of a man who had made a decision. His 6 feet 3 inches frame seemed to fill the room, his dress uniform making him even more imposing. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet, but it carried the kind of authority that made people listen without question. Turn off the camera. It wasn't a request. The cameraman, looking terrified, complied immediately. The red recording light vanished, plunging the room into an even deeper silence. David walked around the table to Lucas. He lifted our son with such gentle competence, holding him against his chest, murmuring soft reassurances. Lucas's cries began to subside, reducing to hiccuping sobs as he buried his face in David's shoulder. "Vanessa," David said, his voice still calm, but with an edge that made everyone sit straighter. "You just struck my infant son." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "I need you to explain why you thought that was acceptable." Vanessa's face went through shades of pale shock to defensive red. He was words. Just presence. "I'm proud of you," I finally whispered against his shoulder. "For what?" he asked softly. "For standing up. For protecting him. For not letting them minimize what happened." I pulled back, looking at him. "I don't think anyone has ever defended me like that before." His expression softened, "Just for me. That's what real family does," he said. "They protect each other. They don't excuse abuse. And they don't ask you to tolerate the intolerable for the sake of peace." Later that night, replaying it all, David's words resonated. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a lifetime of experiences where I was expected to be silent, to accommodate, to accept less than I deserved. But this time was different. Someone had stood up. Someone said no. Someone made it clear there would be consequences. And as I drifted off to sleep, next to my husband, with our baby safe, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not the fragile peace of avoiding conflict, but the solid peace of knowing my boundaries were respected and my worth recognized. What I didn't know then was that this was just the beginning. That Christmas dinner would set in motion a series of discoveries that would change everything I thought I knew about my family, my past, and my own strength. The real war began 3 days later. With a phone call. David was feeding Lucas his morning bottle, and I was staring at the untouched Christmas presents under our tree. It was my mom, Patricia. Her voice was strained, breathless. "Natalie, honey, I know you're upset, but we need to talk. Vanessa feels terrible. She didn't sleep at all. She wants to apologize, but she can't if you won't answer her calls." I pulled the phone away for a second, looking at David, who was watching me with concern. Lucas gurgled happily, oblivious. The red mark on his cheek was almost gone, but I could still see it. "Mom," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "She hit my baby. She struck a 6-month-old child because he was crying. I'm not sure what there is to discuss. She barely touched him, Natalie. You're making this into something much bigger. People make mistakes when they're stressed. You know how important her work is, and having the filming disrupted her work." I interrupted, heat rising in my chest. "Mom." She slapped Lucas across the face because he was interfering with her social media content. "Do you hear how that sounds?" My mom's sigh crackled through the phone. "You've always been dramatic about these things, sweetheart. Ever since you were little, you've blown situations out of proportion. Vanessa was just trying to teach him some boundaries. Sometimes children need firm guidance. You've always been dramatic." The phrase hit me like cold water. How many times had I heard that? How many times had my legitimate concerns been dismissed with that exact explanation? I gripped the phone tighter. "He's 6 months old, Mom. He doesn't understand boundaries. He understands that someone hurt him for expressing a basic need." "Now you sound like David," my mom said, and something in her tone made me pause. "He's always been very rigid about rules and procedures. Military men often are. But families work differently than the Army, Natalie. Families require flexibility and forgiveness." David looked up from Lucas's bottle, one eyebrow raised. He'd clearly heard his name. I could almost see him making mental notes, gathering intelligence. "What does David have to do with this?" I asked. "Well, he's the one who made the big scene. Vanessa said he was completely unreasonable, ordering people around like he was commanding troops. She said he threatened to ban her from the family. Her voice trailed off, as if she couldn't express her outrage at David's behavior. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Mom, David protected our son from someone who had just hit him. That's what fathers do. That's what anyone should do when they see a child being hurt. But Vanessa is family, honey. Family means giving people second chances. It means not letting one mistake destroy relationships that have been built over decades. David doesn't understand that because he didn't grow up with us. He doesn't know how we handle things. The conversation dragged on for another 10 minutes, each exchange making me feel more disoriented. My mom painted a version of events that bore no resemblance to what I'd witnessed. In her story, Vanessa had barely made contact. Everyone had overreacted. David had turned a minor family disagreement into a major crisis with his inflexibility. When I finally hung up, David was watching me, with the kind of expression he wore after debriefing a difficult mission. Let me guess, he said. It's our fault. According to my mother, yes. Vanessa feels terrible, but I'm being dramatic, and you're controlling because you don't understand how families work. I slumped against the kitchen counter, exhausted. She actually said that you don't understand family dynamics because you didn't grow up with them. She's right about that, David said quietly. I didn't grow up with them. I grew up in a family where adults protected children instead of making excuses for people who hurt them. The difference hit me with unexpected force. David's family had its own challenges, but I'd never heard his parents dismiss abuse or ask victims to be more understanding. When his grandmother Eleanor was alive, she was fiercely protective. The phone rang again an hour later. This time, it was my dad, Robert. His voice was careful, the one he used when trying to mediate. He'd clearly been coached. Natalie, I think we all need to take a step back and look at this objectively. Your mother told me about her conversation, and it sounds like there might be some miscommunication about what actually happened yesterday. Dad, there's no miscommunication. Vanessa hit Lucas. Multiple people saw it. There's nothing unclear. Well, that's just it. Vanessa said she was just trying to get his attention, maybe redirect his fussing. She said she might have been a little firmer than necessary, but she never intended to hurt him. And honestly, looking at him now, he seems fine. Children are resilient. I stared at the ceiling, trying to process the cognitive dissonance of having my own father explain to me what had happened to my own child. Dad, intent doesn't matter when we're talking about hitting a baby. The impact matters. The fact that she thought striking him was an appropriate response to crying matters. But that's the thing, sweetheart. She's not experienced with babies. She was just trying to help in the moment. Sometimes people make poor choices when they're trying to handle unfamiliar situations. The conversation mirrored my mom's. Every concern I raised was met with an explanation why it wasn't really a problem. Every time I tried to center Lucas's well-being, the discussion was redirected to Vanessa's feelings, her inexperience, her stress, her good intentions. By the time my dad hung up, I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. Had I misunderstood? Was I overreacting? My parents, people I'd trusted my entire life, were telling me my perceptions were wrong, my instincts misguided, my husband's response disproportionate. David found me at the kitchen table, staring at my phone, looking, as he later said, shell-shocked. He'd settled Lucas for his nap and immediately knew something was wrong. What did your dad say? He asked. He said Vanessa didn't mean to hurt Lucas, that she was just trying to help, that maybe she was a little firmer than necessary, but children are resilient. I repeated the words flatly, hoping to make sense of them. David was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. Then he asked, "What do you think happened yesterday?" The question surprised me, not because I didn't know the answer, but because no one else had asked me what I thought. Everyone had been telling me what to think. I think my sister hit my baby because he was crying and it was interfering with her filming. I think it was hard enough to leave a mark and shock him into silence. I think it was completely inappropriate and potentially harmful. I paused, clarity returning as I spoke my truth aloud. And I think my parents are more interested in protecting Vanessa from consequences than they are in protecting Lucas from being hurt again. That's what I think too, David said. So the question is, do you trust your own perceptions, or do you trust people who are telling you that what you saw didn't really happen? It was a fair, devastating question. The people asking me to doubt myself were my parents. The person supporting me was my husband, someone I'd known for 5 years, but who consistently demonstrated better judgment and clearer moral boundaries. The third call came that afternoon, from Vanessa herself. Her voice was thick with tears, trembling. This was the sister I remembered from childhood, vulnerable. For a moment, a flicker of hope. Maybe this was it. Maybe she'd acknowledge it. "I'm glad you called, Vanessa. Lucas is okay, but I was really shocked. I need to understand why you thought hitting him was an appropriate response to his crying." "That's just it," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I don't think I really hit him. I think I just touched his cheek to get his attention. And maybe because everyone was so tense about the filming, it seemed like more than it was. You know how these things can get blown out of proportion when emotions are running high." The hope I'd felt evaporated. She wasn't calling to apologize. She was calling to continue the family narrative. What I'd witnessed hadn't really happened. "Vanessa," there was a sound when your hand made contact. There was a mark on his cheek. He went from crying to completely silent and shocked before he started wailing. That's not a gentle touch to get someone's attention. But that's what I'm trying to tell you. I think everyone's perception was distorted by the stress of the situation, the cameras, the disrupted filming, David's reaction. It all created this atmosphere where a normal interaction got interpreted as something much more serious. I gripped the phone, knuckles white. "Are you saying I imagined the mark on my baby's face?" "I'm saying that maybe what looked like a mark was just the natural redness from crying. Maybe what sounded like a slap was just the sound of contact that seemed louder because the room was so quiet. Maybe what felt like a big deal in the moment isn't actually as serious as it seemed." The conversation continued for 20 more minutes. Vanessa had crafted an alternate narrative where her actions were reasonable and everyone else's reactions excessive. She was the victim of misunderstanding. When I finally ended the call, I felt like I'd been wrestling with smoke. David found me in Lucas's nursery, standing over his crib, watching him sleep. He was lying on his back, one tiny fist curled near his face, completely peaceful and trusting. The sight of him, so small, so defenseless, crystallized something inside me. "She's gaslighting me," I said without turning around. "All of them are. They're trying to make me believe that what I saw didn't really happen." "Yes," David said quietly. "They are. Why would they do that? Why would my own family try to make me doubt my own perceptions about something this serious?" David joined me at the crib. Because acknowledging what really happened would require them to take action they're not willing to take. It would mean holding Vanessa accountable, which might disrupt their family dynamic. It would mean admitting they failed to protect Lucas, which would force them to examine their own behavior. So instead, they make you the problem. The fourth call came that evening. My mom again, but her tone had shifted. The careful diplomacy was replaced by frustration. "Natalie, I'm concerned about how you're handling this. You're being very rigid and unforgiving, which isn't like you. I'm wondering if maybe the stress of new motherhood is affecting your judgment." I felt David tense beside me. The suggestion that my judgment was compromised by postpartum issues was a particularly low blow. "Mom, my judgment is fine. My priorities are clear. Protecting my child from people who think it's acceptable to hit him isn't negotiable." "But that's exactly what I'm talking about. You're characterizing this as hitting when it was clearly something much less serious. You're creating conflict where none needs to exist. You're making choices that are going to damage family relationships permanently over something that could be resolved with basic communication and forgiveness." "What would resolution look like to you?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Vanessa apologizes for the misunderstanding. You accept she didn't mean any harm. David acknowledges his reaction was excessive, and we all move forward with better communication and more patience for each other's differences." I let that sink in. In my mom's vision, everyone bore equal responsibility. Vanessa would offer a non-apology for a misunderstanding. I would accept blame for misinterpreting. David would admit to overreacting. And Lucas, the actual victim, would be completely absent from the conversation. "What about Lucas?" I asked. "What does resolution look like for him?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, what protections would be put in place to ensure this doesn't happen again? What boundaries would be established to keep him safe at future family gatherings? What accountability measures would ensure that Vanessa has processed why hitting a baby is never acceptable?" My mom was quiet. Then, impatiently, "Natalie, you're overthinking this. He's fine. He's not going to remember any of this. You're creating trauma where none exists." And there it was, the heart of our fundamental disagreement. In my family's worldview, trauma only existed if the victim remembered it clearly. A baby couldn't form lasting memories, so they couldn't be truly harmed. Adult comfort and family harmony took precedence over protecting children from experiences they might not even remember. After I hung up, David and I sat in silence. The movie we'd planned to watch remained paused. This wasn't going to blow over. My family wasn't going to understand. We had to make decisions with people who fundamentally disagreed with our basic values about protecting children. I feel like I'm going crazy, I admitted finally. 3 different people have told me that what I saw didn't really happen. People I've trusted my entire life are asking me to doubt my own perceptions about something this basic. That's the point, David said. They need you to doubt yourself, because if you trust what you saw, you'll make choices they don't want you to make. If you believe Lucas was actually hurt, you'll protect him from people who might hurt him again. They can't have that. But why? Why is protecting Vanessa from consequences more important than protecting Lucas from being hurt? David was quiet for a long time. I think your family has spent a long time organizing itself around managing Vanessa's needs and emotions. She's the center of attention, the source of drama, the person everyone has to accommodate. Protecting that system is more important than protecting individual members who threaten it. His observation hit me with uncomfortable accuracy. Growing up, family decisions often hinged on Vanessa's mood or plans. My own achievements were downplayed if they threatened to overshadow hers. I'd accepted this as normal. It never occurred to me this support system could prioritize Vanessa's comfort over a baby's safety. The final call came close to midnight. Vanessa again. I almost didn't answer. Natalie, I know it's late, but I couldn't sleep. I keep thinking about how to fix this mess. Her voice was softer, less defensive, more sad. I miss you. I miss being close to you like we were when we were kids. A pang of nostalgia. We had been close once. I miss that too, I said honestly. But I need you to understand why yesterday was so serious. Lucas is my baby, and seeing someone hurt him triggered every protective instinct I have. I get that. I really do. And I would never intentionally hurt him. You have to know that about me. Maybe I was too focused on the filming. Maybe I wasn't thinking clearly, but I would never deliberately harm a child. It felt like progress. An acknowledgement. Thank you for saying that. I know you wouldn't hurt him on purpose. But impact matters as much as intent. And the impact was that he got hurt. What I need is some assurance that you understand why it happened and how to prevent it from happening again. Of course, I think what I need to do is be more mindful when I'm around children, especially when I'm stressed or working. Maybe I should ask for help instead of trying to handle situations on my own. It wasn't a full acknowledgement, but it felt like movement. We talked a few more minutes about boundaries and communication. When we hung up, I felt cautiously optimistic. Maybe this could be worked out. But the next morning brought a text that shattered any hope. From Chloe Martinez, our neighbor and friend at Fort Henderson. Saw Vanessa's Instagram story. Are you okay? I opened Instagram, hands shaking. Vanessa's story, family drama, and moving forward. A carefully crafted narrative about the challenges of blending families with different parenting styles. She talked about holiday stress, the importance of forgiveness and grace when misunderstandings occur. In her version, there'd been a minor disagreement about appropriate behavior, escalated by miscommunication. She painted herself as someone trying to help with a fussy baby, misunderstood by overprotective parents. She never mentioned hitting Lucas, never acknowledged any harm. She characterized the whole conflict as a learning experience. The comments were overwhelmingly supportive. Praise for her maturity, grace, commitment to family. I screenshotted the entire story. Less than 12 hours after what felt like a breakthrough, Vanessa had publicly reframed the incident as a misunderstanding caused by my overreaction and David's inflexibility. She'd turned our private conversation about her poor judgment into a public narrative about other people's unreasonable expectations. She had positioned herself as the victim of family drama, not the adult who struck a baby. And she'd done it all while maintaining plausible deniability. When David came home, I showed him the phone without a word. He read through it twice, growing grim. She played you, he said finally. The late-night call, the apparent acknowledgement, all of it was designed to get information she could use to craft this narrative. I felt foolish for believing her, but more than that, I felt betrayed. By someone I'd loved and trusted since childhood, who'd used my willingness to give her another chance as an opportunity to manipulate the situation further. The phone started ringing again, my mom, no doubt, but I was done. Instead, I did something I'd never done in a family conflict. I started documenting everything. What happened at dinner, direct quotes, screenshots of Vanessa's Instagram, notes about every phone call, the language my family used to minimize. For the first time, I was treating my family like potential adversaries. And as I organized the evidence of their gaslighting, I realized this pattern had been happening for much longer than just the past few days. This was how they always handled conflicts that threatened their narrative. This was how they trained me, over decades, to doubt my own perceptions and prioritize family harmony over my own well-being. But this time was different. This time, the victim wasn't just me. It was my infant son, someone who couldn't advocate for himself. And this time, I had a partner who validated my concerns. This time, I was going to fight back. The documentation revealed patterns I hadn't consciously seen. Old texts, social media posts. Every time Vanessa created a problem, the same cycle: shock, excuses, pressure on everyone else to accommodate her version. Like when she showed up 4 hours late to our grandmother's memorial because she was filming a makeup collaboration. My hurt feelings were reframed as selfishness during a difficult time. Or when she borrowed my mom's car, returned it damaged, and the family focused on accidents happen. My mom paid the deductible. The more I looked, the clearer it became. I had been trained to accept this dynamic, to minimize my needs, question my perceptions, prioritize everyone else's comfort. Christmas dinner wasn't an anomaly. It was the most extreme example of a pattern shaping my life for decades. David found me at the kitchen table, surrounded by my case file. He poured coffee. "This looks like intelligence gathering," he observed. "That's exactly what it is. I'm trying to understand how they do this. How they consistently manage to make me the problem when they're the ones causing harm." I gestured to my timeline of family conflicts. "Look at this pattern. Every single time, the same thing." David examined it. Incident, denial, reframing, pressure to forgive, eventual acceptance of the family narrative. It's sophisticated. They've created a system that protects Vanessa from consequences while training everyone else to doubt their own judgment. But why me specifically? Why am I always the one being asked to be more understanding, more forgiving, more flexible? Because you're the one who challenges. You're the one who notices when things don't add up. You're the one who asks uncomfortable questions. He pointed to several incidents on my timeline. In every case, you were the person who initially called out the problematic behavior. They need to neutralize you because you're a threat to their system. He was right. I'd always been the one to point out inconsistencies, to ask why, to push for accountability. I thought I was being helpful. From their perspective, I was a disruptor. My phone buzzed, another text from my mom. "Honey, I saw you read Vanessa's Instagram story. I hope you can see she's really trying to move forward. Maybe we could all get together this weekend to talk through everything calmly." I showed it to David. He shook his head. "They're trying to reset the narrative again. Get everyone in the same room. Apply social pressure. Convince you to accept their version for the sake of family peace. But what if I'm wrong? What if I am being too rigid? What if there really is a way through this?" David set down his coffee cup, looking at me seriously. "Let me ask you something. If one of my soldiers struck a baby during a family gathering, and then spent the next week convincing everyone it hadn't really happened, while publicly reframing themselves as the victim, what would you think I should do?" The question clarified everything. Instantly. If this were happening to anyone else's family, I'd be horrified. I'd advise them to protect their child, set clear boundaries. I'd tell them to document everything. I'd tell them to stay away from people who think hitting babies is negotiable. Right? So why is your family different? I didn't have a good answer. The only reason I was considering compromise was because these were people I'd loved my entire life, whose approval I'd sought since childhood. But none of that justified exposing Lucas to people who might hurt him again. That afternoon, an unexpected call from Chloe Martinez. "Natalie, I need to tell you something. I've been going through Vanessa's social media, and I found some posts from earlier this year you need to see." She sent screenshots. Posts about the beauty of new beginnings and joy of expanding family, with professional baby photos. The problem? They were published weeks before Lucas was born, using stock photos and borrowed babies. She'd been monetizing her relationship with my unborn child, creating sponsored content before it even happened. "There's more," Chloe said when I called her back. A whole series of posts about family traditions, holiday celebrations, multi-generational gatherings. All feature photos from Christmas dinner last year, the one you and David missed because of his deployment. She's been creating this narrative about close family relationships that doesn't actually exist. I felt sick. Vanessa had built a brand around fictional family content. Lucas's crying hadn't just threatened her filming schedule, it had threatened her entire brand identity. When David came home, I showed him everything. He studied it with methodical attention. She's been using your family as content for months. Not just documenting real experiences, creating fictional narratives. Which means Christmas dinner wasn't about family time. It was about creating content to support her business. Lucas and I were just props. And when Lucas interfered by acting like a normal baby, she prioritized her content over his well-being. The realization was devastating, but also clarifying. This wasn't a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a calculated decision by someone who viewed our family as raw material for her business, willing to harm a child to protect her commercial interest. I spent the evening going through more of Vanessa's content. She'd used photos of our wedding, stories about David's deployment, even speculation about our future children, all for sponsored posts. Most disturbing were posts portraying my parents as deeply involved, loving grandparents, despite their minimal actual interest. The gap between her public narrative and our private reality was enormous. The next morning, a barrage of texts from family members, all encouraging me to attend a family meeting my mom had scheduled, all using similar language about healing, communication, moving forward. Clearly coordinated, but I was done being managed. Instead of responding, I called my family's insurance company to report the incident. I wasn't filing a claim, but I wanted it documented. The representative was professional but disturbed, asking if I needed resources for child protective services. I also called Lucas's pediatrician, Dr. Walsh, who immediately scheduled an appointment. The pediatric appointment was both validating and heartbreaking. Dr. Walsh examined Lucas, documented the fading mark, and asked detailed questions. This is cause for serious concern, regardless of intent or family relationship. Parents need to trust their protective instincts. When something feels wrong, it usually is wrong. Your job is to keep Lucas safe, not to manage other people's feelings about your safety measures. She also provided resources about family violence and documenting incidents for legal proceedings. I hadn't considered legal action, but the information felt empowering. That afternoon, Captain Ryan Torres, one of David's closest colleagues, called. Natalie, Maria, and I want you to know we're behind you 100%. What happened to Lucas is unacceptable, and the way your family is handling it is concerning. A wave of relief. Validation. Thank you, Ryan. I've been starting to doubt my own judgment about everything. Don't. You're a good mother, and you're doing exactly what you should be doing. David is lucky to have a partner who will stand up for their child, even when it's difficult. Ryan also shared that David had been consulting military legal services. The military took family violence seriously. There were resources. It made me realize we weren't alone. Our chosen family was standing behind us. That evening, I made a terrifying, liberating decision. I drafted a group text to my mom, dad, and Vanessa, clearly stating our boundaries. We would not be attending family gatherings until Vanessa acknowledged what happened and demonstrated genuine accountability. The response was immediate and intense. My phone exploded. My mom, in a panic, begging me not to destroy the family. My dad texting, asking me to reconsider this drastic response to a minor incident. Vanessa sent a series of messages, alternating between anger and hurt, accusing me of being vindictive. But the message that stopped me cold came from Linda, my mom's sister. Saw the Instagram situation. This isn't the first time. Call me when you're ready to hear about the others. I stared at it. What others? I asked David. I called Linda. She answered immediately. Natalie, honey, I've been watching. I think it's time you knew some things about your family that they've been keeping from you. There have been other incidents over the years. Times when Vanessa hurt people, usually children, and the family, covered it up, or explained it away. I never said anything because it wasn't my place. But watching them do it to your baby, I can't stay quiet anymore. The 2-hour conversation that followed changed everything I thought I knew about my family history. Linda told me about incidents dating back to Vanessa's teenage years, rough with younger cousins, harsh with children she babysat, inappropriate with kids at family gatherings. In every case, the family minimized it, protected Vanessa. Parents were told their children were dramatic. Witnesses were asked to keep quiet for family harmony. Vanessa was coached, but never held accountable. I've watched your parents train that girl to believe she can hurt people without consequences, Linda said. Linda also revealed something that explained so much. Vanessa had been born with developmental delays. My parents had spent years advocating for her, fighting for accommodations. The problem was, they'd never transitioned from protecting a child with special needs to holding an adult accountable for harmful behavior. They continued making excuses long past the point where Vanessa was capable of understanding and controlling her actions. She knows exactly what she's doing, Linda stated. She's learned that if she can make people feel sorry for her or misunderstood, she can get away with almost anything. And your parents enable it because they've spent so many years seeing her as vulnerable, they can't recognize when she's being manipulative. By the time I hung up, I had a completely different map of my family. Decades of confusing interactions now made sense. Protecting Vanessa at everyone else's expense wasn't new. It was a system, and Lucas wasn't Vanessa's first victim. He wouldn't be her last if this continued. The next morning, absolute clarity. I wasn't just protecting Lucas from one bad incident. I was breaking a generational cycle of abuse and enabling. I called Linda back, asking her to document what she'd told me. She agreed immediately. I reached out to other family members who might have information. Some were reluctant, but others were relieved. By the end of the week, I had a comprehensive picture. David and I spent that weekend planning. We weren't interested in revenge, but in protecting Lucas and preventing future incidents. We decided to share our documentation with family members who had children, and to maintain our boundaries, no matter what. Most importantly, we decided to build our own family traditions and support systems. Lucas deserved to grow up where his safety was never negotiable. I felt a deep satisfaction. I was no longer the confused family member being told my perceptions were wrong. I understood exactly what was happening and why. The breaking point came with a certified letter from Vanessa's attorney, demanding I cease what they called a defamation campaign, claiming I was spreading false information, damaging Vanessa's reputation. I hadn't posted anything online. I stared at the legal letterhead. David read it over my shoulder. "They're trying to intimidate you into silence," he said. "This is what people do when they know they're guilty, but can't afford to have the truth come out." The letter demanded I sign a statement acknowledging no assault had occurred. In exchange, they wouldn't sue me. Business relationships. I repeated, the weight of it crushing me. She's not worried about family harmony. She's worried about her brand. Her income. I called Janet Morrison, an attorney Linda recommended. Janet agreed to see me. "The letter is largely bluster," she told me. "Truth is an absolute defense. But the fact that they're escalating suggests they're feeling genuine pressure." Janet explained that Vanessa's business depended on her public image. If sponsors or followers learned about her history with children, the financial impact could be devastating. The legal threats weren't about reputation, they were about income. Prepare for them to escalate further. People with a lot to lose can become dangerous when cornered. Janet helped me understand that I wasn't required to keep family secrets that put children at risk. The evidence I'd gathered wasn't gossip. It was information other parents had a right to know. That evening, I made copies of everything and prepared packages for family members with young children. I wasn't asking anyone to choose sides, just providing information. The response was swift and explosive. My phone rang constantly. Some were supportive, thanking me. Others were furious, accusing me of trying to destroy the family. My mom called in hysterics, demanding an explanation. "Those things happened years ago. Vanessa was just a child. Why are you dragging up ancient history to hurt her now?" "Because it's not ancient history, Mom. It's a pattern that's continuing today. And other parents deserve to know about that pattern when they're making decisions about their children's safety." But she's changed. She's grown up. She would never intentionally hurt a child now. She hit Lucas 6 days ago, Mom. Whatever changes you think she's made clearly haven't addressed the fundamental problem. The conversation deteriorated, alternating between her begging me to retract and threatening to cut me out of the family. It was the same emotional manipulation I'd experienced my whole life, but this time, I recognized it. My dad's response was different. He called late, his voice controlled. "Natalie, I understand you're upset, but this approach is going to hurt everyone, including you and David. If this information becomes public, it could affect David's military career. Have you thought about the security clearance implications of a family scandal? It was a low blow, trying to use David's career. But it also revealed how little my dad understood military values. Dad, David's career is built on integrity and protecting people. His command would be more concerned if he failed to protect his own child from someone with a history of violence. But Vanessa doesn't have a history of violence. These are isolated incidents. You're creating a narrative that makes her sound like a dangerous predator. Mistakes are accidents, Dad. Patterns are choices. And a pattern of hurting children, followed by a pattern of avoiding consequences, isn't something I'm going to help hide anymore. The most devastating call came from my cousin Sarah, who'd been present during several incidents Linda described. Sarah, now a mother of 2, had received one of my information packages. Natalie, I need you to know that I believe everything you've documented. I was there for some of those incidents, and I've been carrying guilt about staying quiet for years. When I saw what happened to Lucas, and how everyone handled it, I realized I couldn't protect my own kids if I couldn't even acknowledge what I'd witnessed. Sarah shared details about Vanessa pushing her younger brother down a flight of stairs during a family reunion, giving him a concussion, all covered up as an accident. I was 17 and scared of causing drama, so I went along with the story. But I've regretted it ever since. When I had my own children, I made sure they were never alone with Vanessa. Sarah then revealed something that truly changed everything. Natalie, there's something else. Vanessa isn't just worried about her current business. She's been in talks with a major network about a reality show centered around her family content. The Christmas dinner footage was supposed to be part of her audition reel. The information hit me like a physical blow. She'd been filming us for a potential TV show without our knowledge or consent. Lucas's first Christmas was raw material for entertainment. And when he interfered by acting like a normal baby, she'd prioritized the footage over his well-being. The network executives are supposed to review her submission this week, Sarah continued. That's probably why she's escalating the legal threats. If this information becomes public before they make their decision, it could destroy the biggest opportunity she's ever had. I shared this with David. His reaction was immediate and intense. Not anger, but the cold fury of someone who'd realized the full scope of a threat. She exploited our family for commercial purposes without our consent. And when our infant son interfered, she assaulted him. And now she's threatening legal action to prevent us from protecting other children from similar treatment. David's military training taught him to neutralize threats systematically. We're not just dealing with a family conflict anymore. We're dealing with someone who's willing to harm children for financial gain and use legal intimidation to cover it up. That makes her a legitimate threat that needs to be addressed through appropriate channels. The next morning, David contacted his command. Colonel Martinez, his commanding officer, made it clear the military expected service members to report child abuse and protect their families from ongoing threats. We can't have personnel being blackmailed or intimidated by family members, especially when child safety is involved. We'll provide whatever support you need to resolve this appropriately. The military's backing was both practical and psychological. It meant David wouldn't face professional consequences, and we had access to military legal resources. Most importantly, it validated our decision to prioritize child protection over family harmony. That afternoon, Janet Morrison called. After reviewing our documentation, she drafted a response that turned the tables. Instead of defending against defamation, we were putting Vanessa on notice about potential legal action for assault, emotional distress, and commercial exploitation. The beauty of truth as a defense, Janet explained, is that it forces the other side to prove their claims are false. Given your evidence, that's going to be very difficult. More likely, they'll realize that pursuing this legally will only create more public exposure. The response letter was a masterpiece. It detailed the Christmas dinner, the evidence, the pattern of incidents. It informed Vanessa's attorney that we had evidence of commercial exploitation and were considering our own legal options. And it made it clear we weren't making public accusations, but sharing factual information with family members who needed it. If Vanessa wanted to make it public, we were prepared. The response to our letter? Immediate silence. No calls. No texts. No social media. The entire Sterling family apparatus went dark. But the silence broke 3 days later. A call from Jessica Chun, a producer at the network considering Vanessa's reality show. Miss Brooks, I'm calling because we've received some concerning information about your sister's family content and the authenticity of the relationship she's been documenting. Before we move forward with any business arrangements, we need to understand what actually happened during the filming session she submitted. I stuck to facts, confirming the commercial purpose of the filming, the incident with Lucas, and the discrepancy between Vanessa's content and our reality. I didn't volunteer inflammatory details, but answered honestly. "Thank you for your honesty," Jessica said. "This information is very helpful as we evaluate our programming decision. Networks have to be extremely careful about liability, especially when children are involved." 2 hours later, my phone exploded. Word had gotten back to Vanessa. She was in full panic mode. My mom called, crying, begging me to clarify. My dad sent texts about family loyalty. But the most revealing response came from Vanessa herself, who showed up at our house unannounced. David answered the door. She stood on our porch, mascara streaking her cheeks, hands shaking with rage. "You destroyed everything," she screamed. "Years of work, hundreds of thousands of followers, business relationships, all gone because you couldn't just let things go." "I didn't destroy anything, Vanessa," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I protected my child and shared factual information with people who needed it. If that destroyed your business, maybe your business was built on lies." It wasn't lies. It was content creation. It was storytelling. Everyone knows social media isn't completely literal. It's about creating aspirational content people want to engage with. David stepped between us, his posture demanding she lower her voice. "You used our family as props for fictional content without our consent. And when our baby interfered with your production, you hit him. There's nothing aspirational about that. I barely touched him, and only because he was ruining months of work. Do you have any idea how hard it is to create authentic family content when people won't cooperate with the vision?" The admission was stunning. In her fury, she revealed she genuinely believed Lucas should have cooperated. Striking him was justified by the importance of her content. She wasn't apologetic about hurting him. She was angry that he'd failed to perform. "Get off our property," David said quietly. "And don't come back. You can't just cut me out. I'm Lucas's aunt. You have no rights to access a child you assaulted," David replied. "If you come here again, I'll call the police." Vanessa's mask slipped completely. The polished influencer, the victim narrative, the claims of misunderstanding, all fell away. She genuinely believed she was entitled to use our family. Our refusal was a betrayal. She left screaming threats, but her rage had strengthened our position. David had recorded the entire interaction, capturing her admission, evidence that would be devastating if she pursued legal action. That night, I felt a complete certainty we'd made the right choice. Vanessa's visit stripped away all doubt. She wasn't sorry for hurting Lucas. She was angry that hurting Lucas had consequences. The war wasn't about one incident. It was about the right of children to be protected from adults who harm them for personal gain. It was about the obligation of other adults to speak up, rather than protecting abusers for family peace. We'd chosen protection over peace, truth over comfort, our child's safety over family dysfunction. The consequences were painful, but liberating. For the first time, I was free from managing other people's emotions. The battle was far from over, but we'd established clear boundaries. We'd shown ourselves that some things were worth fighting for, even against people we'd once loved. Lucas would grow up in a family that prioritized his safety, valued truth, and understood the difference between love and enabling. That was worth any price. 6 months later, Lucas took his first steps in our backyard. David and I cheered. He wobbled between the garden bed and the fence, his face lit up with pure joy. No cameras, no staged lighting, no audience beyond the two people who loved him most. It was authentic in a way Vanessa's manufactured content never could be. The legal threats had evaporated. Janet Morrison crafted a settlement agreement, ensuring privacy while allowing us to share safety information. Vanessa agreed to seek counseling, though I doubted her sincerity. The reality show opportunity disappeared. Jessica Chun later told me they'd received multiple corroborating accounts about Vanessa's history, and the legal liability was too significant. Even the entertainment industry, with its questionable ethics, drew hard lines around child safety. My parents initially maintained their stance, but as more relatives came forward with their own experiences, their narrative became unsustainable. Linda organized a family meeting where witnesses shared their accounts, creating a comprehensive picture my parents couldn't entirely dismiss. The meeting devastated my mom. She genuinely seemed unaware of the extent of Vanessa's patterns. My dad retreated into his usual emotional withdrawal. Neither apologized directly, but their approach shifted from defending Vanessa to avoiding the topic. They stopped pressuring me to reconcile and started interacting with Lucas during brief, supervised visits that felt stilted but safe. Not the warm grandparent relationship I'd hoped for, but workable. Vanessa essentially disappeared from our family dynamics. Her social media shifted away from family content. Linda reported her engagement had dropped significantly. The most surprising development was the response from extended family. Several cousins and aunts thanked me. Sarah became a close ally. My cousin Marcus, who'd been planning to ask Vanessa to babysit his toddler, was especially grateful. "You probably prevented something terrible," he told me. "I can't thank you enough for having the courage." To Lucas, who taught us the difference between family that demands your silence and family that earns your trust. May he always know the difference between love that protects and love that enables. The contrast with previous family celebrations was stark. No performing, no managing, no walking on eggshells. Lucas played freely. As I watched him, I felt deep gratitude for our choices. He was growing up surrounded by adults who modeled healthy boundaries, authentic communication, and unwavering child protection. The most surprising gift came from Eleanor's sister, Margaret, 93, who heard about us and requested a visit. Eleanor always said family isn't about blood connections or social obligations. Margaret told us. She said family is about people who show up for each other when it matters, who tell the truth even when it's difficult, and who protect those who can't protect themselves. Margaret revealed Eleanor had been concerned about Vanessa's behavior for years, but had been dismissed. "Eleanor would be proud of what you did. She always believed protecting children was more important than maintaining comfortable lives. You honored her values." That validation felt like a blessing from beyond. Now, watching Lucas navigate our backyard, confident and fearless. David joined me. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. "None," I replied, watching Lucas's pure joy chasing a butterfly. "Look at him. He's fearless because he knows he's protected. He's curious because he's never been punished for being a normal child. He's confident because he's never been told that his needs don't matter." David nodded. "He'll grow up knowing that love means protection, not accommodation. That family means safety, not obligation. That his worth isn't negotiable, even with people who share his DNA." The lessons we'd learned through crisis became the foundation for our family culture. Lucas would understand that healthy relationships required mutual respect, that boundaries were self-care, and that sometimes love meant saying no to harmful compliance. As the sun set, and Lucas finally tired himself out, I felt complete peace. We'd traded the familiar dysfunction of my birth family for the uncertain work of building authentic relationships. It was more than worth it. Lucas would never remember that Christmas dinner, but he would grow up with the benefits of our decision. And he would know his parents could be trusted to protect him, that his needs mattered, and that love never required accepting harm. The war that began with a slapped baby ended with the victory that mattered most. A child who was safe, loved, and free to develop his own authentic self. In losing my birth family, I gained something far more valuable, the knowledge that I could build the kind of family that actually deserved the name. So, I've shared my story, my journey through something I never thought I'd face with my own family. It was brutal, eye-opening, and ultimately, deeply liberating. I'm still processing a lot of it, honestly. But one thing is for sure, I learned where my real priorities lie. What about you? Have you ever had to choose between protecting someone you love and maintaining family peace? What would you have done in my place? I really want to hear your thoughts in the comments below.